Hi, kia ora, and welcome to Creative Connections, where we have beautiful, inspiring conversations with artists living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Jakic. I'd like to welcome you to my 200th episode of Creative Connections. I started the podcast in March of 2021, and I am absolutely delighted and thrilled that the podcast is still going. And I'd like to just thank you all very, very much for listening and for all your support. And I feel like this podcast is one of the most important things I've ever done. And I intend for it to continue for many years to come. Now on to this week's episode. Lynne Sandri is a contemporary artist living in Seatoun in Wellington. With a career spanning over 25 years as a full-time artist, Lynne has had over 100 exhibitions and numerous artist residencies. She has built studios and opened them to the public. She's taught students and mentored artists, and she sells just about everything she makes throughout New Zealand and internationally. Lynne's artwork delves into the beauty of nature, the cycles of life, and the evolving concept of home. She's a maker, curator, and collector with an insatiable appetite and curiosity for art in all its glorious forms. I see Lynne as an amazing, experienced role model for artists with some sound advice, as well as a damn good human. In this episode, we talk about the benefits of art communities, creating and opening her studio to the public, stepping away from being represented by galleries, and why she has chosen to do this, why she loves working her own gig, and how she sustains her practice by thinking creatively and outside the box, as well as taking calculated risks. And we also talk about her business-like approach to her art career. As a past judge, selector, member of the board, and part of the founding team of the New Zealand Art Show, and a guest judge in other art shows, Lynne shares her experiences selecting and judging art. Lynne talks in depth about her various series, including floral paintings on long rolls of canvas, her landmark paintings, painting on books, her still life and landscape paintings, and her heavily textured sculptural paintings. This is a long episode, but an absolute gem and well worth listening to. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Lynne.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm glad I finally pushed the record button because we've been chatting for ages. It's so lovely to meet you. Welcome to Creative Connections.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to having more of a chat with you and sort of sharing our stories. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So you live in Seatoun in Wellington. Can you tell us a little bit about where you live and what you love about it?
Well, for the last 27 years, I've been living in Seatoun, which is a seaside village about 5 minutes from Wellington Airport. You basically land in Wellington, come through the tunnel, and you arrive in this lovely seaside village. And my home and my separate studio are just down the road from the sea. So I get to eat, work, play, live, and swim very close to water, which is just good for your practice and good for you, really. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds gorgeous. Yeah, such a lovely city, isn't it, Wellington, to be in?
It is a great city. It's had a few knocks lately, and I think that every city has its own time in the sun. And Christchurch got knocked around, and then Wellington was the shining star, and then Auckland had its moment. And I think that we're just a little bit out of the sunshine right now, but it'll come back. Like, what I have learned is that Wellingtonians are very resilient people, and we tend to be able to bounce back, and we're a hardy lot. That's great.
Yeah, you have to be down there.
You do, or leave.
It's a very artistic community as well, isn't it?
Sure is. There's basically an artist on every corner around here.
And you were born in Auckland?
Yes, I was. In the initial stages, I grew up in Howick when it was a paddock, and when the schools were only just made. So it's quite a different city there now. And I came to Wellington in my early 20s and never looked back, really. It was a chance to sort of get my own identity and feet on the ground. And yeah, I find that if I'm away from Wellington too long, I really start to ache. It's like, got to get home. I've got to get home. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love the way that the city is set up. So set amongst water and so easy to get to everywhere. I mean, I still love going to Auckland and visiting Christchurch and all those places as well, but Wellington's where my heart is, really.
Yeah. It's under the skin.
Yeah, yeah, very under my skin.
And so you live such a creative life. You've been a practicing artist for, more than 25 years full time,
I'm
which
a bit of
is
a dinosaur.
incredible. It's amazing that you've had such a long, successful career. So as a child, how did you go with your creativity? Were you sort of encouraged down that line?
I've been a full-time artist for 30 years. I actually did all my numbers because I was thinking, I had my first exhibition in 94 and then left to go full-time in 96. And I just went, oh my goodness, that's a long time. It was when I was about 5, actually. It's been in me. And I had a wee friend at primary school and she was the most amazing drawer and she could draw horses. So her and I were friends, and she would run around with a little sketchbook. Like, you remember the old autograph books? She used
Yeah.
to have an autograph book and a pencil, and she'd be sketching. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And we were all horse obsessed. And she would draw the most beautiful horses. So I was a little competitive, and I think that always helps because I was like, I'm going to draw as good as you. And then I was hooked. So basically from the age of 5, I was, drawing and sketching and always had a little book with me and a notebook. And I think I've always in my bag, I've got a notebook and a pencil. I always feel a bit flappy if I don't have my paper that I can write ideas down or just, kind of capture something. It's sort of ingrained in me. But in terms of pursuing that as a job or a career, that was, I don't think so. My parents were really hardworking makers. My dad was a builder and is a builder, and my mother was a dressmaker. And they were just like, "No, you're going to get a decent career, and you just keep your art as a hobby." Because it was like an actor or a poet or a musician. You're always going to be poor. So my parents were like, no, 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 get yourself a career and then, do it on the side. So I left school and went straight into banking. And I was there for 15 years in various sort of roles. And I don't regret it actually because it taught me. I was in head office. I got moved to Wellington and head office as training and development and HR and marketing. I did all sorts of roles, and it taught me how to do structure and marketing and business and have discipline and the way that you approach things. And I try now to use that approach in the way that I run my everyday life and how I work as a job. Being an artist is a job and it's a business. And I think that if you can think about it that way, then you get to still be able to live in the real world and pay your bills.
Yeah,
That's the
that's so good.
grounding. Yeah.
And you can really see the influence of that kind of learning and that kind of experience for you that it has come through. And I have so much admiration for the way that you run the business side of your practice.
Well, we're a one-stop shop, right? And you have to be. And if you don't learn how to do those skills or ask very nicely, my husband is incredible, Graham. He, helps me with updating my website, and my daughter is a chartered accountant and she does my accounts, and, all these very special people who just, give you little bits of information or help you along the way. And I've got a son-in-law who is very strong and it's like, come here, even if it comes around and say, I need you to help me get this up or give me your height. And, you're always roping people in, and I try to pay them handsomely in art and food and keep them coming back rather than eye rolling going, what does she want now?
Yeah,
So
I love that.
we get to actually, if we want to continue what we're doing, I think as makers, we have to be very resourceful, right? And we get to be the cleaner, the marketer, the strategic person, the whole lot. And if you don't, then nothing gets done.
That's
So
right.
that's my kind of way of thinking.
Yeah, we'll dive more into how you actually run your business as we get through our chat.
Yeah.
So, can you just describe to us, Lynne, your art practice? It's very varied and rich. So, could you give us a little bit of an overview on the kind of work that you make?
Well, I do work on different series, and because I've been going for full-time 30 years, I find that it's quite interesting when you look in your house and you look at different paintings that you've had in different series over the years, you see how your practice evolves, and it's actually quite handy to keep a couple of paintings or one painting from each series to actually kind of mark where you've been or what you were thinking in that year, because it is hard to go back and redo that because you were completely different then. So what I do is I focus on different series of work, and sometimes at, for example, I had an open studio exhibition in November, and I've done that a few times actually to make it incredibly personal, and so that people can see where the work has been made. And I find that connection is it just demystifies the art, and also creates this lovely connection between you and your audience. And what I found that I was working on some bigger pieces, which can be very unattainable for some because of the cost, and also because of the space. For some very big pieces, you have to have the right kind of setting for it. So I had been working on painting on book covers. I'd been experimenting with that idea for probably the last, 10 years. And I sort of finally, sometimes things, as you work with things like, how can I present this? How can I put this on the wall? And I tried it in all different guises. And then I thought, actually, if I take the innards out of the book and then mounted them into frames, it meant that they really do transform into a piece of art. And then I painted a story upon a story, and they kind of grew. But I wanted to create this series because I wanted some smaller pieces to go with the bigger works in the studio. So sometimes it's the series I'm working on is determined on what I've got planned for that year, or what I've got planned for the upcoming exhibition, and the environment that I can work in. So, and then this year I've got an exhibition, a solo exhibition in November, and I'm going to be doing more big work. Like, it's time. It's time to get those floor to ceiling ones back into and get in it, because I think that we need to be kind of slapped around a bit with our visuals and distracted, incredibly distracted by some art and visuals, and that's why I want to go bigger. Whereas I didn't last year because I didn't think people could they weren't ready for that. Whereas I think we're ready for that now. So
Yes.
that's what in terms of the series and practice I'm working on. I have a series of the Landmarked series, which has the big X through it, which is sort of marking your territory, or marking your own space. And then I've got the big floor to ceiling works, which you feel like you're basically stepped inside the world of the world of the painting. And so that's where I'll be heading. And the very sculptural pieces. So I go a bit mental with paint. It's like buttered. It's like coloured butter. And I actually had a lovely client who's become a good friend, and she is the most amazing baker. And so whenever she comes, Mary brings the most beautiful baking, and I just said to her, this new series is actually like your icing. Like,
Yeah.
it's delicious and rich in colour, and you just want to eat it, and it kind of flicks up. And so oils, and a lot of it takes on quite a beautiful luster. And so we kind of had a giggle about how food and oil paints can actually share similar tendencies. And I think there's an element of tactileness that goes with being able to kind of be part painter, part sculptor.
Yeah.
It's I would love to dive into the world of sculpting, but I know that you need a whole different studio for that. Whereas
Yeah.
I can push my oil paints further, and I've tested it out over the years of actually how far I can push it before it wrinkles up like a raisin or falls off.
Yeah.
But the act of experimentation.
And your series, I mean, we'll dig a bit deeper into each of the series. You also create light boxes, which is a really interesting concept, which I love. And then you have other series like the AG Jar series, and almost more of a sort of still life feeling about them. Yeah, which is a beautiful sort of culmination or sort of collaboration of all your ideas in some ways. It sort of all comes together. So this year it feels like you've brought in all the ideas from your past series, and you've kind of got a particular focus on the three main areas, which is your landmark series and your large paintings on canvas, and
Yeah.
then also your more sculptural paintings. So can you tell us a little bit about those three series and how you manage them, how you work on those sort of concurrently,
Yeah.
and yeah, just tell us a little bit about where those have come from. So, shall we start with the landmark collection?
Yeah. The landmark collection actually began, I mean, land has always been a common theme or recurring motif in my work. I always seem to have grass or land as being part of it. And that's the reason for that is my dad, as I mentioned, was a builder. And he always said to me, whatever you do to make your way and, to be successful in life, own land. Have a house, have a plot to call your own. And that's where the whole land has come from. And it began as the quarter acre dream, went to the quarter acre question, like, can we do this? And now I suppose it's the quarter acre myth that, it's becoming a thing of a thing of legend. So land has been the premise of my work. And then what happened was I was actually at the Hamilton Gardens, and I'd been there for the first time, and I'm like, this place is incredible. And not only because it was a sensory overload with colours and, the most amazing gardens, but when I was standing in one of the gardens, my shadows, I was taking a lot of photos because, as makers, we're always taking photos, right? For a reference. And my shadow was in amongst the garden, and I thought, that would be an interesting piece to actually put, the shadow of me in it, so that you're placed in the land. And then when I went, I was sort of thinking, and I thought, no, it's too literal to actually have an outline. So I thought, actually, what's an alternative? So I came up with the X, which I think was, we used to, in the old days, people would sign there either with a thumbprint or an X, and that was marking their territory or their signature or even, a potential hidden treasure. So I love the whole, there seem to be so many connotations with how the X could be used that's, I found that now I place the X in the landscape as a focal point, but also to actually just sort of make a point and for whoever is reading the story, that they can kind of put themselves in whatever form or meaning that they have. But I come from my intention of it being it just, making your mark in the land. And that's whether it's through creating a home or it's creating a garden, or even I've got one of a big cross underneath an island at the end of my road, and that we can't actually own that. So there's a whole lot of different references that the landmark series is beginning in. So I'm having fun exploring that, and those are sort of medium to sort of large size pieces, so that you sort of feel like an element of being drawn into it. And then the sculptural pieces are where I can go a bit crazy with more small, because I'd have to sell my car to afford the paint or sell my firstborn. Because it just, building up the oil paint to such a high volume you need a lot of paint, and you also need a lot of time. So I can actually work concurrently with these. Those take months to dry, the small sculptural works. Whereas on the bigger landmark, because they're a bit bigger and they're not as much paint, I can have them working at the same time. And then I tend to do all of that in my studio, and then I'm actually in my hallway in the house, which is one of the reasons why I fell in love with this. Well, we fell in love with this house was it's got a really large entranceway. It's like a double hallway and a great big huge, welcome to the house kind of when you walk in. And that allows me to work on a 3.5 meter stud, and I can do my floor to ceilings in here. And I tend to paint in here, much to the disgust of my husband, who's like, what's with this paint on the floor? And there's the walls are full of holes, and the floors are full of paint. And I just kind of go, well, it's a patina, it's the artist's patina, and it means that this house has been loved and lived in and worked in. So he doesn't say much about it now. I think he's got used to the idea.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
And how good that, you've got your studio out the front, but then you sort of like to come into your home for certain parts of your practice, which I think is so good. And those canvas, those large works, they're on a canvas roll, aren't they? And you
Yes.
basically hang them from the top, and then it can be hung from the stud all the way down and even over the floor if you want to, or it can
Yeah.
be rolled at the bottom depending on the height of your wall, which I really love.
Yeah. Well, I initially started with doing it on handmade paper, the big rolls of heavy, heavy paper. And I would gesso them up as much as I could, so it actually felt like a canvas, and it was heavy enough to kind of handle it and not actually, have any bubbling or movement. But people, when I first started with them, they were like, oh no, it's paper. I'll rip it, I'll kick it and the dog will eat it. And I'm just like, you won't. But there was just a barrier to it. So I listened to that and I thought, actually, let's see if I can do this with canvas. And actually, because canvas is more durable, and having it rolled up, it actually, I needed it. There's a series of experimentation, and thank goodness my mum and dad, because they're just makers and problem solvers, and my dad's a bit of an inventor too. So I'd go, right, I need to do this, Dad. What shall I do? And he'd go, well, you can fold it this way and make a batten. And then, so between him and I and my mum, we came up with a concoction about how to actually hang it on an invisible batten so that it keeps straight and that it could just sit nicely onto a wall and be quite easily installed. Because you've got to have something that actually goes up easily, for workability for me and the person who's getting it. So I sort of got that going with the invisible batten, and then it drops down and rolls, and you can do it to any kind of size. So it means that it can be worked around. I had a client who have turned into firm friends now, and they had one going between two floors, so going up a stairwell, and it dropped down. It was like, I don't know, 5 meters long, and they moved house, and they were like, we want this painting, and but it's twice the size of any wall we've got here. And they actually moved it into their lounge, and they just used half of it until they redo their new house, where they'll actually make a wall for it and do a 2-story on it. So it actually is quite. I was thinking, great, it's versatile, it's working.
Yeah. If somebody was just to buy one of those paintings, can they just kind of roll whatever they need at the bottom to make the right size for the wall?
Yeah.
And could you adjust the top so that you're showing sort of the bottom part if you wanted to?
That would be a little bit more trickier, but you could do it. But more of the beginning, because it's got the batten on top of it underneath it, it would make it a bit trickier. But you could actually even cut the whole thing in half and make 2 big paintings out of it. The painting behind me actually is actually began as just I had a canvas that was a bit of an odd size, and I thought, I'm just going to see how this works doing it the other way. and then using the batten this way. But I didn't like its looseness, so I ended up going into Gordon Harris, who I adore, and I've got a guy in there called Ben, and he's an artist, and we chat about art all the time, and I was thinking, I've got this situation, what can I do? And it's lovely when you can just, it's the artist community, right? And he just said, right, here's what size is it? And we worked it out. And then I just stretched it onto I worked out, got a stretcher and got it made and did it in the hallway on the weekend. And it made such a difference. So I could, you can actually it's got a long life to it that it can transform from a floor to ceiling, but it can also be made into a stretch canvas at any point. So,
yeah,
you've got to have things that last. Yeah.
That's right. And what made you think of doing such a massively tall painting?
I wanted to be in it. I wanted you to be, and sometimes you are so restricted by a canvas size. And I don't know about you, but I go to a lot of exhibitions, both here and internationally, because I just can't get enough of it. And when I've stood in some of these really big paintings, I've been to the David Hockney, and he's got one of the biggest canvases in the world, and you're just there and you're walking through it, and you're actually basically in a painted land. And I think that when I saw mine, I thought, how big can I get? That if you're going to paint a very large work, you've got a transportation issue, stretching issue, the way that a canvas warps or moves or whatever. And that's why I sort of thought I wanted it to be super big. And this was the way that I could do it. So I just tried to problem solve. And then as like anything else, you look at something and then that won't work. And then you evolve into using the canvas or using the batten. So it's just a trial and error, really.
Yeah, it's a nice way to sort of challenge your practice, just to kind of get that idea and then figure out how you're going to do it in a way that suits you and that suits the way that you work, but also is practical.
Yeah.
And so how do you actually manage it? How do you make it?
Basically, I get a quite a heavy canvas, and I cover this hallway that I'm in is probably 4 meters wide by 5 meters long, and I will turn it over and I'll gesso it all on the floor, and then I'll transfer it up onto the wall. So, like I said, the house is like a pin cushion, and thank goodness there's so much art around that it covers it, and then I'll paint it in here. So you'll gesso it with beautiful white, so it's lovely and flat. Tape it, and then so it lays flat on the wall, and then I begin with a series of underpaintings, and then you just bring it slowly to life. And I tend to do it just with acrylic paints, because now the new golden acrylics actually have a beautiful, in the old days, acrylics, they would dry and it would dry matte, and their beautiful luster and their colours just went. And now with the new golden products, their liquid acrylics are just glorious, and they stay strong and with a nice luster to them as well. So I tend to just layer upon layer the acrylics up, and that means that the canvas can be rolled. So if you use something like with the oils, this one was a bit more heavy oils, and I put quite a lot of, it was quite built up. But this one you couldn't roll. So I tend to just do the floor to ceilings with a lot of acrylics, and it's got there's a flatness to it, but it works.
Do you have some sort of excellent stool that you stand on to get up high?
I have a stepladder that I've mastered that is probably a trusted stepladder that, I think that you've got to be up and down and all around, and I will tend to drop it. I've got different stages that I can do it sort of at my height, and then once I've done it, I can then move it up. So it's a bit like doing a mural, I would assume. I've never done a mural on a building. I don't like painting outside because I mean, Wellingtonians, right? We are so weather, it's raining and windy, put a coat on, whatever. But actually to paint in it, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So I like the comfort of an internal room for that.
Fair enough. But it is a little bit like a mural, as you say.
Yeah.
And then you just roll it up and sort of keep working. How do you find,
Yeah.
when you can't always see the entirety of the canvas that you're working within? How do you find that?
Oh, I do a design first. So I will actually do a design to scale. And that's actually how I work on my commissions as well. So what I tend to do is I tend not to be very, I don't let a lot to chance. I like to figure things out first on a actual design. So I'll actually hand paint it to scale first to see what balance I've got, and then I'll upscale that. But I'll do that. I'll put the whole thing up and sketch it out and then do the underpainting. And then I'll drop it down and start working on one segment at a time and then move it up. So I
Right.
keep on, and so I'll be working on the entire thing and painting in the hallway at all hours, to make it work. And the great thing about actually having it in here too is that this is sort of like the heart of the house. So you're walking through it at different times. And I think an artwork needs to be watched. You need to see how it changes in different lights. And sometimes it's that whole phase of a painting, right? You begin with great gusto and thinking it's the greatest thing on earth, and then it looks a little ugly. Something doesn't working and it's driving you mental. And I call it the teenager phase, that I love them, but they're just not working with me. And and then you got to keep on at it and then keep going. And then it eventually matures and it starts to blossom.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like being a parent of teenagers, you just have to trust
Yes.
that the work that you put in earlier is going to pay off and you're going to get there. Yeah.
I think as artists, or makers, we have very strong hope muscles. We've developed muscles of perseverance and muscles of hope, and you just keep going, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you can fix it.
And those works are mostly all floral, aren't they?
Yeah, mostly all botanicals. I've sort of done different series of that in terms of with a different theme, like botanicals that you can eat. So it's everything that has got, because I'm kind of greedy and I love food and experimenting with ingredients. So I really like that whole notion of okay, what they're not just plants, they're not just something that's beautiful, they're also very useful. So, or there'll be working botanicals. And so I've got sort of different balances depending on the color balance that I've gone with and what the theme I want. Or it could all just be about natives. So it's the nice thing about it is I've worked with some really amazing people. That's the nice thing about commissions. And I know that some artists go, I'm not going to paint to anyone else's order. And I'm thinking, actually, they're missing out on working with some and getting to know how other people's stories. And my collaborations with people allow me, it pushes my art further, because they'll go, these are the botanicals that mean something to me. Could you incorporate an element? And you're sort of problem solving about how the balance can actually make it work, and then what the emphasis is, and then where the heaviness is going to be and how it grows up. So it's like the botanicals are growing up the wall, and then you're standing in the middle of it and you're in it. And
Yeah.
that's what the feeling I want to do. But when you're working on a commission with people, they'll have a certain bit of an angle of what they like or what's surrounding their home. Like some people have just gone, look, I've got, these botanicals because they mean this, it could be because of a parent or a child or a symbol, and they want that color. And then I've got to just work with how I can actually make it work as a painting.
Yeah, I love that. It's a form of research, isn't it, in a way? And it's like a really solid starting point that then you can kind of bring to your place that you need to bring it to as an artist, but then also connecting with somebody else's story. I actually really love that.
Well, I think that, like we've been talking about, being a maker is a solo sport, right? And I think that when you're working with people, not only does it keep your work real and grounded, and also, sometimes you think you've got the best ideas in the whole wide world of what your art could be, and sometimes you need to not think about anybody and not be distracted. And I do that for my exhibitions. I don't think of anyone. I just think of what the series is and what it means to me. But when I'm with um, a the relationship I've got with a client or their family or wherever it's going, you actually get to dig into their world, and it does actually pushes your art, because sometimes people have said, "Oh, I'd like to try this," and I'm like, "I hadn't thought about that. I quite like that." And then,
Yeah.
"Oh, I could actually do something along those lines," and it's triggered you onto something else. So I think that we have to be problem solvers as makers, and also be prepared to be open to learning or finding out some more stories. I found
Mm.
that's sustained me. So that sustained me in my practice and as an artist, because you've got to keep on evolving. You can't do the same thing every year.
Yeah.
You've got to have different series to sort of push ideas forward, so that you can, I want to be doing this till I'm 100, and if I can, if I'm not all wrangled up and got a thick lizard skin. I can't move by then, but if Louise Bourgeois can do it with her spiders, maybe
Exactly.
we can too.
Yeah, and it's just all about a change of context. Like, you know, it's you kind of responding to what your body can do, and then your artwork kind of moves along with that, which I think is actually really quite an interesting concept. That,
Yeah,
this is the period when I was very mobile, and that's,
yeah,
you up and down the step ladder.
yeah.
And then, your work may evolve. It was like the work that I did when I was in Turkey in the hotel room, which I
Oh,
have mentioned on the podcast, just this
yeah.
little tiny table space that I had.
Wow.
And the work reflects that. It reflects that time, it reflects that context. And I quite love that. And
Mm.
everything was really small, and that's just the way I could work. It was all on
All you could
paper
do.
because it had to come back to New Zealand, and
Yeah, it couldn't be oils because it wouldn't dry.
yeah.
There's limitations that are placed on you and your materials.
Yeah, and I think that is an interesting part of an artist's practice, and I think we just have to embrace it as we get older.
Yeah.
It's like that is another influence on our work is our bodies and our how we are aging.
I think so too. And um, it's funny working on the big floor to ceilings. It is really physical. I find I'm gessoing on the floor, and I've got when you see carpet layers and they've got those big things on their knees. Well, I've got those, and I'm kneeling all over the floor, and I'm sort of creaking to get up and thinking, up and down the step ladder and try not to fall off. And my daughter comes in, and Brianna goes, "Mum, will you just take it easy on the ladder?" And I'm just like, "That's not, it's fine, you know, everything works." And it actually, but you are energized by it too. So when you're doing bigger work, there is an element of energy that feeds you. Whereas when you're working quite small, sometimes, you get at the end of the night, and you might have found that when you were in Turkey trying to do small stuff in your
Yeah,
room, there is you do tend to, but when you actually can go bigger, gosh, it feels good. So
it does
hopefully
feel
that
good.
keeps me strong.
Yeah,
Till I'm very, very old.
exactly. I mean, it's the physicality of your practice, which is interesting, isn't it? It's sort of I guess it influences the final result and the actual way that you've made it.
Heck yes. And also the chemicals. We have, I sometimes I'm in my studio, and um someone will walk in and they'll go, "Woo, it's strong in here." And I'm thinking, I can't smell anything. And you have to be, it reminds me, get the fan on, get your air circulating, and hopefully it doesn't take over my lungs, or we do work in a real, I look at my hands, and I've got friends who aren't artists, and they've got beautiful hands. I'm thinking, oh yes, let's just cover these in rings, and don't look at we are, it's not only just the patina of your practice in your environment and your studio, but it's also on you. I suppose a life well lived, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like I love the way, whatever you paint in, whether it's a shirt or an apron or overalls or whatever you paint in, becomes almost a reflection of you. It's such a personal piece that it's kind of celebrating and marking, your making.
Yes, I
Yeah, and
agree.
that's why I love paint palettes so much, and I always end up cutting them up and doing other things with them because I think they're taking this moment in time and they're sort of showing almost how you work, but then they're also so beautiful.
Yeah, but I do think you're right with your palette. It is what are the colours you're using at the time or you're underpainting in, and it does tell a story about what you're working on that day.
Yeah. So just going back to your process, the landmark or X marks the spot type paintings,
Yeah.
they are very much sort of harping back to that sort of quarter acre dream kind of idea, aren't they? And they have a real sense of space and perspective. I mean, you are often working on grass as well. Could you describe how you actually create those X's and what you're thinking about with the environment you're capturing?
Um, it's not only just the land element. There is the I am a big fangirl of the garden, and I think that my mother and my grandmother and my sister, we're all hands in the soil kind of people, and although we can't grow a lot living so near the sea in terms of beautiful cottagey, more flowery things, I've got a lot of hardy natives that try to flower themselves that I can, use as reference. Or I'll go to the garden centre and I'll buy the pot and I'll bring it into the studio and use that as my muse. Um, I suppose the process begins of looking, and like any artwork begins with the observation. And I think that's the trait that we may be all tarred with, is that we are noticing things, and whether it's the everyday and when you go walking, like I feel very lucky to be able to live where I do, where I've got land, sea, sky, garden, and all I need to do is check out what's happening in the seasons and be a little bit observant. Well, be a lot observant and to ask a lot of questions of why. And I think that allows me to figure out what my image will be from that. I know someone said, "Oh, how is your thinking process?" And I said, it's just like a movie in here. I'm always, I've got a lens going in and down and round and noticing, wait, what's popping up, what's changed, and how can I use that as a painting?
Yeah.
I'm always going, I could make that. That could be made into this, And I think we're always searching for an image. Then what I do is I just do a whole lot of photo references to it, and from my own observations, or I'll just go onto Google and check out, because sometimes they've got the perfect shape or shadow on something, or even just a way that a tree looks against the light of the sky coming back, just a branch formation. So I kind of put together a whole lot of images and then use that as my library. And then I'll do a design, and I'll sort of try to figure out, okay, what's the point of what I'm doing? What's the story and what's the angle? And what's going to be the focal point, really? What is going to be, sometimes it starts with a word. I might be listening, as I work in my studio, I'm listening to Radio New Zealand, which I love because it's like working with a very clever and intelligent, diverse person who's kind of chatting about everything that's going on in the world, and 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 then sometimes they pop in just a little key word, or they bring up a song and it's sort of about the color blue, and you just go, huh? And then you write down, and I've just got a big thing of paper on my working desk, and I'm always just writing down the odd little key gem. And sometimes titles come from those conversations, or the podcasts I'm listening to, or the audio books, whatever. You've got a whole lot of stimulus going around, and you just pick little bits out of it that might actually could be worthwhile. So I'll do a design, and then I'll begin the process of layering it up. And I do have a app that has been quite uh, handy, and I'm tending to use it more and more, which is the Smartest app. And sometimes I'll actually do the design and paint it up, and then I'll scale it to the size I want to, and then I'll put it onto a gallery wall inside the Smartest, and it allows you to do rounds, rectangles, whatever, on a very plain background, but as a finished kind of product. So you could actually see it. Oh, actually, that scale, in the olden days, it used to be that you'd have a projector some people use projectors when they were doing people, and they would project how big it would be. Whereas actually this allows you to take a design and then go, actually, here's the foundation of it. How big could it handle in a room or actually on a gallery room? And it allows you to kind of piece it through and think it through first, so that when you do actually get your canvas stretched and delivered and ready, or whatever support you're using, you've already done the groundwork first. I'm quite structured in my approach to it, because you've got to be, or you're going to have a lot of canvases that get facing the wall in your head, or you're going to waste a lot of materials. And I use a lot of paint, and I don't want to waste it.
And this series feels like it's such a personal take, and I guess your viewers would also bring their own stories to that idea of place and territory and home. Where do you think this series is going to take you?
The interesting thing is I'm creating a body of work for my November exhibition. Actually, the Landmark series is also working, and I've just done a small collection of highly sculptural ones that have got, I sort of went, actually, there's some X's forming in these, and I ended up doing the whole lot with X's through them. So a lot of the work that I've been doing regardless is starting to evolve into it. So I keep on seeing X's in things. So it's funny when you do have your antennae out on something and then you start seeing it, right? What is it? It's an RAS. There's some system for that if you focus on something, you see it everywhere. And I think that with this series, it's in keeping with my practice and my theme from the very beginning, which is the land element, and having a feeling of foundation and your feet firmly in the soil as a result of it. Because with the land series, I wanted people to kind of go, I've gone outside, cut out a piece of land, and I've basically put it onto my wall to say, this is mine. This is mine. This is where I belong, whether it's through memory or history or affiliation or identity, that you had your own piece of land. And I think the Landmark series is a continuation of that. So in terms of where it's going, I suppose I'm starting to see X's in a lot of things, and maybe it will it'll grow into the floor to ceilings as well. So I'm not quite sure, but I'm liking it. And the more I've been doing, I just did a commission for a beautiful family and delivered it on the weekend and hung it, and they had sort of quite small children, and I didn't know this family. It was so special because I was trying to see the interpretation of how they saw it, and because it was quite textural, the kids were kind of touching it and finding the X and the depth and the dark and the light, and then waking up, and she sent me a text to say, my son has just said, Mum, the pinks are popping. And, and they were watching the art grow as they grew. And it was quite lovely to see their interpretation of it. So, sometimes you don't know how a painting is going to be received and lived with. And I feel like people are starting to understand what I'm doing with that series, and I'm really liking it. So, I'll keep on pursuing that or making that series evolve as long as I can, really, until it tells me not to. Yeah,
it must be such a nice feeling to know there's just so much within these ideas that you can explore.
Yeah, there is. And I think that when you're working with people, that's why I do love working with commissions. I have worked with galleries in the past, and that was a stage of my career that I really, needed and enjoyed. But I found that I had a disconnect with people. And the gallery basically, get forth in that studio and make, please. And then, and you have no feedback over that period of time, like 3-4 months. And you're on a famine because you're creating and you're hoping, like anything, that you'll get some feedback on it. And then you do your exhibition and hopefully people have responded. Whereas when you're working on a collaborative commission basis, you're working with people and you're getting that instant feedback. And I think that that's probably helped me sustain my practice over the length of time. I have honestly for 30 years been a maker. and I work full time on it, and I want to be able to work full time on it for the next 20 to 30 years too. So God knows what I'll be making then. I'll probably be going outside and digging it in the I'll be doing installations with X's. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? But, I think it's, as an artist, it is about trying to look at how something can evolve and also how far you can push something, but also to get some feedback along the way to keep you grounded.
Yeah.
And that's what I need, though. That's just my practice personally.
Yeah, everyone's different. Some artists
Yeah,
like to kind of hide themselves away, and that's the only way
yeah,
they can work. But
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I agree, and I think it does give you a more of a holistic, well, your career becomes more holistic. It's you're getting that sort of feedback, which can be hard when you don't get it for some people. And
yeah,
I've talked about it on the podcast before, but we built our previous house with exhibitions in mind. So we actually designed it so that I could show my work in my home.
yeah,
And for me, I just love that idea of talking to people about my work and putting it up, curating the show myself
yeah.
and creating a space. I think that was part of what I really love to do as well, not just the actual making of a work, but curating a space, thinking about a series and where things need to go and and then having people come to my home and then share that work over a weekend. That's how I did it. I really, really loved that kind of format.
It
And I
works.
think it's something I haven't, well, I did about 3 shows like that. I've done also a few shows in friends' houses in the past. And that was quite a long time ago now, like 15 years ago. But I do like that idea, and I feel like because you've had the experience, you've worked with the galleries, you've kind of done your time,
Yeah.
and then you'd got to the point where you're like, actually, this is how I want to do it, and you've created this incredible studio. So that leads us nicely on to you talking about your beautiful studio. Can you tell us how that works and how you create the solo shows?
You're talking about the having your exhibition as an extension of your home and your studio. I think we have to continue, like, the traditional model of just using galleries as our way of showing our work. We have to be creative as well about how to get our work out there. So it's not, that's the conclusion I've have come to over years, actually, and probably over the last 5 years. I've sort of gone, actually, I've always tried to hunt down a venue or a gallery space and work with sponsors and create an event and, do all the usual formula. And I just sort of went, actually, we need it needs to be a bit more personal. And people are going to exhibitions and standing with I was just noticing the dynamics of how people were interacting, and it became a party. And I love that. It's nice to be able to have it, but actually that's not going to sustain your practice. And then you'd have to go and get another job to do that. So I figured out that actually people wanted to see where something is made, and then also to see how it could be done in context of, I love galleries and I love the white walls and the expanseness you can kind of having to imagine, but some people can't imagine what it could be like in a domestic setting or even in a commercial setting. I've done a lot of the commissions to go into foyers for Robert Jones, and there's quite a different process that goes on with that and that look. But most of my work is for individuals going into a home to be part of someone's life. And I think that if you can have that as part, so that when they go into your studio and that setup, it's not a stark white gallery, it's a place where something is made, and they get to not, what did they say? Don't ever show how the sausages are made, right? No one wants to know it goes sausage. But I think that there's an element that actually people do want to see. I mean, there is a bit of mess in my studio, and I tidied up for my open studio exhibition, so it does actually look quite clean. But I think people like to see the patina on the floor, the markings that have been of the paintings that have gone beforehand, so that, I've been into artist studios and they've been pristine, and I'm like, where's your mess? Where have you slopped your paint, and where have you got expressive? You need to get this place dirty. And I think that there's the studio is a place where I can be messy, and the paint can get slopped or dripped or whatever, and it smells like a ripe, you know tube of paint, and that's, so that it's like going into a fantastic chef's kitchen, and you just kind of go, look at your tools. How did you do that? And look at how you're baking that, or how and I always thought I wanted to be an artist, not a chef, because a chef's moment is just that one moment or a photograph, and then it's gone. Whereas with a piece of art, it continues to live far longer than we do. And
So
I think
true.
that, and it has a lasting impression, and hopefully it's loved for a long time too. So I think that the studio is an extension of yourself. And if you can show as much of your thought process, like people, I do have appointment only, because I find that I'm in my zone and creating. And if someone turns up at the door and I'm like, usually I've got paint stuffed up because I'll have an itchy face, or I've got, and I'll go inside and I've got, green paint stuffed around and I'm thinking, oh, they didn't tell me. And, like such an idiot. But it just means that I can kind of prepare my head.
Yeah. And you're not getting, your flow's not getting interrupted.
Yeah, and you do have to, they say that we are so distracted by all the technology regardless. Like it does actually, I have to put my phone away and turn it off, because it's like a lolly. I keep on going back to it. And it's the same thing. They say that it takes about 20 minutes to get back if you're distracted. And I think it's the same thing, as I do treasure my time every day, that I just go, right, I've got a good 6 hours stint on this. And I can just go. And then, Graham will come home at maybe 6 or 7, and I'll be, a day's kind of state. And it does take me a while to kind of flick out of that. And time goes. I mean, that time just disappears when you're right in it. But if you've got someone knocking at the door, or coming in to just have a kind of cruise around because I've got 10 minutes free, that just, I couldn't have that as an open gallery. But for an open studio on a set weekend, works a treat. And I've done it for the last 4 years, actually. Each year I did an open home and an open gallery, and I took down all the collection I've got, and then I sort of had special rooms, because I did at the New Zealand House and Garden, chose I was like, but nothing's designer here. It's all just kind of, it's curated, but it's, but anyway, people loved it. There was a sense of connection, and they understood, and they could see how you lived. And I think we talked about it, that your home becomes an extension of you. It's our nest, that we the longer you stay in a place, the more you make it as a, it's your skin, really, isn't it?
It's a reflection of you.
Yeah, wrinkles and warts and all.
Yeah, exactly. All the
and
good
the odd
parts.
stop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I love the way you do that, and having that plan for your, well in advance. You have the date kind of locked in, and so people are expecting it, but then it's also something for you to work towards, which must be helpful. How do you balance the open studio work with your commission work?
Well, at the moment, I've got about 8 commissions booked in, and I tend to work with a person, figure out their design, lock it in, and basically say, here's your design, your cost, your size, and your due delivery date. So I basically have a planner that gives me, I've got week by week worked out, and then so I've sort of I work sort of like 6 months ahead with that, and then I'll allow an element of creativity, but I kind of build in a little bit of time around that too, that you're actually just going, oh, I've got this idea, and I'll try that, and I'll lay that out one as well. So there's a bit of fudge factor around that for to create stock and to create a body of work in preparation for the exhibition. And then I'll basically park all the commissions and then work steadily on probably 3 to 4 months of create. And that's when you have your famine, because you have to have your 6 months of your commissions to help fund all your paint and your materials and get that together, as well as to pay for the commissions. But then you're also preparing for it's like a harvest. You are continually preparing ahead, and I've got a year ahead in terms of what I need to do. But I like to be able to share an open solo exhibition once a year, because I think it's important to show people that you're still pushing and you're still current, and you're still, you're only as good as your last exhibition or your last piece of work that someone saw. And if they're still saying, are you still painting? You're obviously not showing up enough and getting your work out enough. And that's, I think, it's a business, it's a job, and show up, do it, get it out there, and repeat.
Yeah,
And
make it happen.
and be up to your neck in it and go swimming in it. It's great.
Yeah.
I love it every day.
Oh, I just love what you do with that. And your studio it looks so beautiful from the outside. It's the weatherboard with a great glass door with studio written up the side, which I think is very visually appealing. And
Yeah.
then a big window, which you put one big work into, don't you?
Yeah.
And so just visually looking at that, is it in a place that people walk past or drive past?
Luckily, it's right on the way to the beach. So my studio is down the driveway, and I've got a sign on the footpath, and which is up all the time, and it just says by appointment only and phone number. And so people are basically, there's a fish and chip shop called Frank's, and best fish and chip shop, and one of the best fish and chip shops in Wellington, and people on a beautiful day will just get their fish and chips. And you see people coming past, wafting that beautiful smell. And they're always looking in. So I try to make sure that the driveway isn't full of cars, because they get to look down, and because it's beautifully lit and it's a great big huge window, I'll always have something changing in there all the time, so that it does look inviting, but it just kind of allows them to see something on a changing basis. And I've tried to do that. I think you always need street coverage wherever you are. You need accessibility, that people can just meander past and look if they want to, and or discover it. I've had a lot of repeat people come back because of that. And also, I had a studio across the road, which is the old doctor's offices, and I was in there for about 10 years, which was brilliant, but I always had the brilliant front window facing, and people just sometimes want to go looking, they want to go for a wander with an ice cream, and it's just that walk past. What I learned from that was that I needed to have a front facing window, and you need a dedicated space. I know that people try to work off their tables or in a room, and I've tried all that over the years, and you need to have a decent amount of committed space to make it work, and also for you to close the door at the end of the day, so that you can leave something unfinished and then continue to it, rather than having to tidy up or even to drive. I've had places where I've had to drive to, and it's just harder to make that work. Whereas if it's close by or walking distance, you get there, and sometimes a little bit too often, sometimes I forget. That is my happy place. I could go in there and play all day, but
isn't it great? It's such a good position to be in. But, it's interesting,
very
the
lucky.
whole open studio idea. I feel like some people are reluctant to kind of make an appointment. And then, some people are reluctant to kind of pop in or investigate further, especially New Zealanders probably.
Yeah.
But I think the way that you set up that exhibition, the open weekend is quite accessible, and it feels like it works. And I have looked back on your Instagram and seen that, some of your open studio solo exhibitions have been like, selling sort of more than 30 out of 40 paintings.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what are you doing to make it so successful?
Well, I think it's inviting the right people. Like I've got some really incredible. I've made some beautiful friendships out of the people who've bought my work over the many, many years, and I think that there's also been different series of work which I think allows people to keep on coming back and go, oh, I haven't got that series. Because it was quite interesting listening to the dynamics that were going on with the audience. Was that, oh, I've got a book series, or I've got a A.G. Jar series, and now I'm ready for this one, and I really like your sculpt. And they were they weren't just buying the odd random painting. They were, if you've created a relationship with them and you get to enjoy them as much as the other way round. And I think that's the key thing is if you're in it for a long time, the relationships, I've got clients all over the world and throughout New Zealand, and they'll come down or they'll buy online. Like I'll make sure that everything's well marketed, and I've got a list of people that go, when you do more of these, can you please let me know? And I'll make sure that I let them know. And I think it's been dedicated to following up with people and listening to what they would like and actually doing something about it. Like I know that even I was in lucky enough to be in an art buying group. So this is one way of helping you keep kind of real. And that was I'd had this group of really beautiful women and friends. And we were together for like 17 years. And we would put on $50 a month. And then we'd go and buy a piece of artwork with an allocated team, like 3 of you. And what it did was it made you realise what it was like to remember how to buy what people are going through and what they're feeling like when they go, and what you needed to do as an artist to create that environment to make people not feel like, oh, I'm a bit scared to enter into this area. It's too pristine or too austere. And also what the connection was, how the art made you feel. And I think that actually doing something like that as a regular active practice, not only do you develop beautiful friendships with these amazing women, but you get to and get some other artists' work and enjoy it. But it just keeps you connected and grounded. Galleries are finding it really hard out there right now. And it's pretty, what does my husband say? Lumpy. I really like that word. It's very lumpy out there, and we all have to look at different ways of how we can show our work and also the relationships that we've got with people. And I think we've got to be a little bit cleverer in terms of the way that we get our work out there and our stories out there, rather than just, like I said, the traditional models. So doing the open studio, it's a lot more work, and I try to combine it with, we've got this amazing florist who grows her own flowers, and she's got all her land around her house is covered, and she grows all these. She's amazing. So I was like, right, I need a bucket load of flowers from that for the exhibition, create the environment in it. And I've now got this fabulous friend called Mary, who we've become great friends, and she bakes all this amazing food. So she's like, right, I'm making the food. And so you've got all these, friends, and I've got lovely friends who just go, yeah, I'm coming to help you. I'll talk to people and guide them into here and you have a system set out, and you have a system set up, and then everyone's briefed. But a lot of friends and family are hauled in, but you do have to call on big favors. But make sure you look
have that support network around you.
Yeah,
and it's so interesting to talk to you about that, Lynne, because it's something that we don't, not a lot of artists wouldn't do or don't do, but just seeing it as not just opening your studio, but it's that relationship building that goes, all year. Yeah. And to build towards that, and sort of communicating with your collectors and listening to them. And that's what is the great thing about opening up your own place. It's like you're the gallerist and the curator and the collector and the marketer, but all of that work that you do is informing what you're making, and is informing the relationships that you make and the connections you make. And so it's kind of a win-win, and you're really looking after your people.
Yeah, you have to. They're looking after me too. They're feeding me with not only by saying, yes, I want that piece of work in my life, but they're also feeding you in terms of feedback. And, what is it? It takes a village of people and friends and relationships and more to grow an artist. And I really do believe in that, and that to sustain an artist, like it's like a musician. You have to do the concerts, and occasionally you have to play the songs that they came to hear, as well as but you need to also play some new work and experiment and, but don't deviate too much from it or you'll lose that. But actually just continue with having a theme going through it, but, rather than random songs. It's,
it's getting that balance. Do you find
Yeah.
that you have enough time to experiment with new concepts or new ideas?
I never have enough time. I mean, I could paint for 24 hours a day if I could and still never get through the ideas. And I think that I'm always bubbling away with something and thinking about, and some ideas live and some ideas will be parked until they have their time. But I think that we are always collecting ingredients. And I think that the time they'll have their own time when they come or not, if they still make sense, and the paintings will tell you that. Some work, some won't, and some live, some don't.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay, and that's just evolving, right? And some are happy mistakes. You've got to be able to have an element of time to experiment because, crikey, sometimes they will work, and then you go off onto another that creates another new series or a size, and or just even the conversations you have. Like I did a couple of paintings for a client, and he said, and he's a jeweler, like beautiful jeweler, and he said, "Wouldn't these be fantastic on smaller rounds? And you could just have these big textual things." And I was going, small rounds, really small rounds. That could be quite cool. And so the next time I was at Gordon Harris, we went rummaging in and found these beautiful little round panels, and then started just from him and listening to what he was saying. And because his thing was jewelry and working with precious gems, he was thinking smaller. But, like from that, ideas get sparked. So, I could have either let that idea die, or I sort of went, right, I'm just going to give that a little try,
Yeah.
And then you do. Some you do, some you don't. But that's what I love, having that interaction with people. And I think that, people, especially in New Zealand, there seems to be more of overseas, I find that to buy art, really you need to go through your galleries because it's just so big, right? And whereas in New Zealand, because there is a benefit to us being a small population, only sometimes, but it means that we do tend to look around local. And I think that artists are now becoming more accessible and are having to kind of go, here is me, and come and have a look. And we are kind of we're becoming a little bit more thicker skinned in terms of comments and feedback and all that kind of stuff. But we have to survive. We have to get out there and look at the different ways of showing our work and telling our story, really.
And you've been doing this for 30 years, you're getting some really great skills. But I wonder if you ever have moments where you actually doubt yourself or moments that you have something that you're struggling with in your practice.
Absolutely. I think we're human, right? And I think we're always, no matter who I talk to or wherever they are in their career, they always have self-doubts and struggles. And I think that adds to the complexity of who you are. And I think that if you are too confident, that I think that shows in your work. You have to be confident in what you're doing. But I'm doubtful in every painting I make. I always look at it and I go, that constant questioning, is this good enough? Am I good enough? Is this working? Is it new? Is it not? Is it too much like something else? And then you just got to go, just do it. The only way to do it is to do it. And then if it's you don't. I learned about was it paralysis by analysis, and that whole point of never making any. I've met so many artists and done a lot of mentoring, and a lot of them were like, I just don't know where to start. Which series shall I take? What idea? And I'm just like, start. You can fix it. If you never start, how can you won't even make anything. So, and I think that it's you've got to just keep on making and keep on doing it. And so those are my struggles. But also, it's not all wine and roses. There's times where you do question why you're doing what you're doing, and is there too much art in this world? Does anyone need another painting? And I think that's why another reason why I chose not to be with a gallery is because actually I needed that connection with people to keep on filling me up, because you empty out when you paint. You're putting your heart and soul and you into it. And if you're only ever getting the feedback once a year or twice a year with your gallery, your showing, your openings, it's not enough. And I think that keeps me on the straight and narrow by getting the feedback in from people, and that helps me with the self-doubt. So I don't think I think it's healthy. I think that's just the way we're drawn, right? We have to question things, or we never push our work. So yeah. And also being taken seriously as an artist. I do get asked, what do you do? And and what do you do for a real job? That if you must have a very successful, rich husband. And I'm like, no, I pay the bills too. We have to both earn we have to both be working and to have a life that we have. And so it is, I do struggle with that sometimes, being taken as a profession, it is a profession. And I think that I don't know, maybe.
And you do work, like you are working.
Yeah, I'm not having coffee with everybody. Like I do that in the. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a very common reaction, isn't it? And I mean, do you ever find that people take you less seriously because you're not represented by a gallery?
Initially, I think that I did my time with galleries for about 10 years, and I'm so involved in all sorts of other things as judges and different shows, and I've been artist in residence at a number of like Scots College and Samuel Marsden, and because I am involved in so many other things, being represented by a gallery isn't the end and beyond. It's not, you don't just you have to have a myriad of things that you're involved in to expand your practice. And I think you do need your time at a gallery to help yourself establish a reputation, a price point, and to actually kind of just figure out how that whole industry works. But I think if you solely relied on it, I don't know whether it's sustainable. It wasn't sustainable for me. I had to think outside of that. And because I had a business background, that helped me. And I think you're always learning, right? Like people always go, oh, where did you study art? And I'm thinking, actually, it's not just about studying art, it's about studying business. And if you want to maintain your practice and not have to work 3 other jobs to afford your oil paints, then you have to be a bit more business-like about that. And that's the conclusion I've come to. Not necessarily the right conclusion for everybody, but it's working for me. And I've been in it 30 years, and there's been feasts and famines, but I'm still here, and I've got, it gives me comfort knowing I've got people saying, I want that, and I want it booked in for this. And I'm like, was it an artist does a happy dance every time someone says yes? And it's
totally.
makers, it's the greatest thrill.
Yeah,
so,
and you're a wonderful role model to a lot of us artists, on how to make it happen. Like you've got that background, and you've got the drive, and you're very proactive with what you do, and you are making it happen. Plus, you have an incredible talent as a painter. And you have been quite involved with the New Zealand Art Show, and you have worked with other shows as well, or other organisations as selector or judge, and you were part of the board for the New Zealand Art Show. So can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, and then we'll just dive a little bit into your role as a judge and selector and what you were looking for?
Absolutely. The New Zealand Art Show it's been going 23 years, and I was lucky enough to be invited at the beginning when it was being created, and just it's all about an idea, starting with an idea and then building on that. And Carla Russell and Midge Murray, this awesome force of women that persevered through thick and thin, and have got, and it's the same sort of thing in terms of putting the practices and the systems to make a big machine work, and they've really nailed it. In fact, it's probably one of the best shows I've seen set up. And when you look behind the scenes to see how things are actually working, they've really nailed it. And from the early stages on the board, just I think what they needed was a practitioner, someone who was actually working in the arts as a practitioner, to kind of just keep it real. And when we were doing selections, there was a team of people that we were, helping to do selections, and they go, no, yes. And I'm like, hang on a minute, let's just have a little, don't be so, you're dismissing this person's, story and life without actually really looking into it. So just give the justice that each artist needs. And they just take a little bit longer than a quick, it's a coliseum of thumbs, right? That's the art world. As people, you're in, you're not. You fit in at this point. Well, I like you or not. And I feel that everybody needs a bit of a fair game, and if not, can we actually say why not? Not that you're going to say why not to every person, because it will take all year, but it was just trying to. There was a collection of different people and different skills that helped create this whole show. But I mean, I must admit, I've been out of it for quite a while because it just took too much time, and it was really already amazing. So it was just, they were just changing it as it evolved. But I was lucky enough to be asked back as the judge for the R.J. Nelson Sculpture Award, which was like serious, $20,000. Like that's a substantial amount for a practitioner to just use or just be acknowledged for. And so the tenure was like each judge gets 2 years to do it. And it's a real thrill and kind of terrifying, to be honest, because here's you up there judging, and they're like, who are you to judge, and you are just like, well, I'm going to try and give you a fair call to the people that are here and looking at your practice of work and the consistency and what you do in terms of the criteria, and make a fair assessment. It was fantastic, and actually it gave me another perspective too on how other artists work and why. And then they asked me to do the emerging artist judging with another artist called Malaki, who is a beautiful sculptor in New Plymouth. He's really special. But we were doing the emerging artists, so it was the next run of people that were coming through, and to see this new talent as well, after working so long in the industry, to actually see these bright new buds come out was just, and to see the skill and how they've been influenced by their teachers and their stimulus was fascinating. So, I sort of get asked to do a number of things, which I'd always, try to live up to and do my best. I live by best foot forward, right? If you're going to do anything, give it 120% and just try your best. And, I'm a judge at the Wellington Airport. I don't know if you've been through the Wellington Airport at Christmas time. Oh, it's spectacular. Like, it's filled with Christmas trees, and it's a cystic fibrosis Christmas tree festival. And I judge the trees and have for about the last, 6 or 7 years. Amazing. But there's it's this beautiful joy. Like, these aren't just trees. These are pieces of art. And they are just going for it in terms of how they create their own trees, and they mold their own trees, and then they'll cover the whole thing in flowers, or it's no ordinary. And but what it does is it brings a lot of joy to people coming in and out of the airport, and there's quite a lot of competition that goes on. There's like 60 or 70 trees, so there's a whole lot of stuff that I could go, I'm not, that is a couple of days work to do it, and you're not getting paid for it. But actually, to be involved in it and to work with all these people and for a good cause, there's that whole thing about showing up and doing it and contributing and being part of the artist community. You do have to say no to a few things. You get students coming in and for half a day, and you're just going, oh, I've got a bit of a deadline going here. So you can't say yes to everything, but in the past, I have said yes to a lot of things, and I've loved it. It's been a two-way thing. So
yeah. And I imagine it does inform your practice in some way. And it's just, it sounds like you have quite an extensive community from the sort of your collectors, that kind of community and people who are involved with your studio, but then, wider communities, which is so great for an artist, I think, and a big part of what makes you tick, obviously.
Well, I think you have to. Like I've sort of repeated, we do work on a solo basis, other than having a dog or a cat. We do have our little shadow creatures that aren't too demanding, but also just keep us, hello, stop working for a minute and enjoy the sunshine. I do think that is a key part of it. And the bigger the web that you create, the more that you sort of, if there are wobbles, you've got the web that kind of helps, bring you out.
Support you.
Yeah. And you do, we are up and down through good and bad times. And you do need that, whether it's your family or I've got such amazing friends, like I said, friends who are artists who I adore and get so much from and try to maintain that. But also friends who love art that also keep you grounded and loved. It's great. But
So
you got to work
and
with all of them.
And then the art shows, from the time when the New Zealand Art Show came about, there's been many sort of developments in the art show world in New Zealand, which is great.
Yeah.
The Auckland Art Show and,
Art
all
in
the different regional art shows, Art in the Park, which is amazing. So you haven't put your work in any of those shows at this stage? It sounds like you're probably too busy for that.
Yeah, I liked working on the outside of it, and I go to it and support it, but I find that I like to have my own gig. And I think I'm so particular about how something is hung and lit and the space it is, where it sits, that I'd be far too painful to it be to. So actually it's good for me not to be in there. And I think that I've just got my own way of doing things and my own channels or paths that I like to go down. So the art fair, but I have done them in the past. I think that you have to try a whole lot of things out, and it's not just one thing. But as my practice has evolved, I know what my areas are that will help me sustain me, but also how I can, I can run it and I can run them myself. So I like to do it myself.
Yeah, fair enough. I totally get what you're saying there.
Like the hen who made the bread, right? She was like, oh, well, I'll make it myself.
Yeah, exactly. And for sure. What advice would you give to your younger artistic self or someone else starting their creative career?
Well, it's not just the advice I'd give to someone, but it's my daily reminder to myself too, because I think we all need to constantly grow and learn. And now with all the technology that's available to us, we can just tap into here and figure it out, right? Or even even ChatGPT gives us some brilliant, even just to say what's a couple of great two-liners for my Instagram feed. It's an editor, but it's not to do your work for you. I love all that. But I suppose the advice I give to myself is keep learning and develop those perseverance muscles, because I think that through my practice, there have been up and downs and times where I've just gone, I don't know if I can keep on doing this, or, or sustaining this, like how I can't afford the materials, or how do I put a show on when it's going to cost, blah, blah, blah. And you've just got to find a way. And I think that one muscle that we do have, along with perseverance and hope, is just problem solving, is to just go, okay, if this is what's happening here, how can I get around it? or how can I make this work? And even when it's just when you're trying to figure out something in a series, or it's like doing the floor to ceiling works, how do I stop them from drooping? How do I make them flat? And you just turn it over to your mind, and at 3 a.m. it'll pop up and tell you. Usually, I don't sleep a lot, and I think it's constant evolving, problem solving, saying yes, showing up, making the work regardless. And if you can't afford the most expensive whatever, go smaller or find another alternative. I look at people like Fleur Wicks, who has got a studio in Newtown. And, she's painting on cardboard and doing the most beautiful word paintings. And I'm just going, you're doing it, and then she's talking about it on Instagram. And I just think she's so resourceful and fresh. And I see lots of examples of, great artists, Anna Stitchfried, Jane Blackmore, these women are doing all these stuff and sustaining their practice by thinking a little creatively. And I suppose that's my advice to myself and to anyone who's in a making practice, is to, just don't stop at the first hurdle and don't give up. Don't ever give up. And just, I was talking to Ellie Middleton, the artist I've been doing some, working with. We get together every month at night and we do, what have we done? What are we up to? And what have we learnt? And then we share our practice together and we help each other just by talking through what we're doing on a regular basis. And the one thing she always sort of said, oh, what's your, words of advice? And I said, the only way to do it is to do it. Like, get on and just get it done. And that whole thing about what we were saying before is persevere and just keep making the work. And things will come from it. But if you actually just don't do anything about it, nothing, well, you've made a decision. Nothing will come from it. Yeah. So that's what keeps me going. And
and I love the way that you've done that. You've brought all your skills together and you do diversify a bit with your series, which also must be quite motivating. I absolutely love the way you paint on the back on book covers, which I feel like, I think I read something about, that sort of came about by you wanting to create some more affordable pieces within a show. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It was how can I do it? I had been painting on books for a while and then figured out how I could actually present them, because I tried getting on the wall with, nails and string and then doing all sorts of things, and it was a bit awkward and it wouldn't sit properly and it just wouldn't present. It was too hard. So I kept on shelving the idea, and then I had a 3 a.m. moment and I thought, actually just take the insides out of it. A painting on the book covers. I'm a real bookie. I love books, and to respect the books and keep them going. I look at bookcases and I just go, oh, all those beautiful bits of art, covered of words behind, and it just meant I could bring them out and give them a story upon a story and my interpretation of what the book was about. And then they live for another life. They have another life.
Yeah.
So I just looked at how could I do this and how could I frame them and create it so that it was at a really good entry point rather than a print. I got nothing against prints, but there's a lot of prints out there. And there is a flatness about prints that, whereas there's something delicious about, holding a book and the tactile feeling of it. And if you can actually put your interpretation on it and then have that to look at, my job is done.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a brilliant idea. And I just learning more about your books, and people can find more information about that on your Instagram account.
Absolutely.
But I just feel like it's quite inspiring because it makes you think, oh, yes, like what, it just makes you look at your own environment and what you could be doing with the things around you or the things that mean something to you. And
Absolutely.
I think it's nice for artists to know that, you can go down another road that's a little bit different. And I guess you can't necessarily tell that it's your work with some of the works are clearly yours on the books, but some of them are quite different.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it means that you can experiment a little bit, because every book actually makes you go, actually, how am I envisaging this? So you can actually go a little bit off like I think it's important that you have a series of work and that you're not just doing random paintings or random ideas. And I think that they do need to be pulled together. Whereas the book series allows me to actually, I can go, actually, here's an Enid Blyton, and or here's a I did a Martha Stewart, Just Desserts, and I just watched her documentary about how she had just fought so hard to do what she was doing, and her book was called Just Desserts, and so I just automatically I'm a huge ice cream eater. I love ice cream; it's my most favorite thing of all time, and in fact, you can see me most times at gelato shops. Anyway, but so I just thought actually just the most simple dessert is an ice cream. And to have a singular soul in a cone of an individual telling her story, it seemed fitting. So, sometimes sometimes my work can be quite complicated and detailed, whereas sometimes with the books, it allowed me to actually just take a single simple thing and then leave it alone. So, it's good. And sometimes you need that. You need that.
Yeah, and have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, have some fun, or use some humor or wry humor in it, but then go back to a big landmark painting.
Yeah.
So I'd be doing that while that's drying because that was on acrylic, and I'm working with oil. So I tend to have a number of works going on at the same time, and it sometimes allows you to have a bit of a breather and come back to something. So
it's so perfect, and it's such a lovely series. Like imagine sending a photo of Martha Stewart's book to Martha Stewart. It would probably be an incredible artwork for her to have. Maybe you should try that.
Well, it's funny. I did a one for Peter Gordon because I'm a big fangirl of Peter Gordon. I've met him, and I've he's just so. He's an artist with food and so much New Zealand, and he had, the Sugar Club in Wellington, and I found his cookbook, The Sugar Club, and I was just like, yeah. And so I did a painting on that and, sent it via his Instagram as well. And so not for him to say because actually that was one of the first ones that sold, because I think that there's a lot of fan people of his, but hopefully you can kind of trigger a link into something that is like, I love his work as well. So it is a kind of like a collaboration without them in a sense.
Yeah, I love it. And it's also a wonderful starting point. Having the book, finding the book, and learning about the book or reading the book or whatever, and then making your own connection in your personal way, like you said, a story within a story kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is such a great concept.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, and sometimes you do. I went to a friend's house, and he had a book that the really old jungle book, and he said, oh yeah, I said, oh, these are a really beautiful collection of old books, and he said, oh yes, that my mum gave or my dad gave it to me, and I've had it since I was a young boy, and I got it, and I sort of flipped back the paper cover, and it was this beautiful embossed jungle book, and I started to twitch a little bit, and I'm like, this would make a really good painting. I know what I could do on this. And he sort of kind of took it back off me and put the cover back on and put it, and I just went, oh, okay, I need to find my own.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Sometimes people do give you, different books, or they'll go, here's this. And that is a changing, and I'm in a lot of book groups as well, with groups of really beautiful women and clever women and thinking women. And the way that we share books and stuff, it's because of that foundation of what books and words mean to us. So that's the kind of premise. So I will continue with that series, but I've just got to go out and find a heck of a lot more books.
Yes, that's the thing.
Trigger,
but that's quite motivating, isn't it? And speaking of motivating, are there any artists who particularly inspire your work?
Yes, what artists haven't? I think that the lovely thing about the technology that we've got is that we've got access to so much, and we've been traveling quite a bit for the last 10 years, and luckily my husband loves to go to places, and he's very patient with me as I go through all the galleries and museums and just, like I'm a pig in mud, really. And I've got people who I've been big fangirls of, like David Hockney. I studied him even at UE Art, and I think he's incredible, just the way he evolves and he changes, and his perspective and his observations of the simplicity of life and seasons. And the scale, he was the motivator for my big floor to ceiling. So, people are, there's little droplets of stuff that they pop into your head, and from it, what is it? Other artists are the compost that goes into your soil, and from it, your new ideas grow. And I think that, seeing some of these works for real does give you a little, flick. More close to home is Michael Smither. I adore his work and always have. The way he paints so simply, and also you can be sitting in front of a portrait of his and just it's bewitching. It engages you and it stops you, and it stops traffic. And I think that that's a sign of a good art, that actually makes you stop, and it kind of grabs you by the chin and makes you look at it. And his work has always done that for me. And as he's evolved, as well as people like Louise Bourgeois, her, and the fact that she, no matter how old you are, you don't, I love that you actually don't, it doesn't matter whether you're 20, 30, 90, whatever. If you can still make art, and you can still make art that's relevant, then do it, and that's what I hope to be out. And there's no expiry date on it, other than just the pure physicalness of you being able to make it. She's a great reminder of that. And but even people like Gretchen Albrecht, I followed her since I was about 15, her big hemispheres, and her colorist, being bold in a color. And I think that color makes you feel something, that it should actually give you a physical reaction of joy, or just something, a physical reaction. And I've always had that with her work. And I loved that her father used to make all her canvases, and my dad and my mother have been a huge part of my practice, and have been making my canvases and light boxes, and God, for anything. They'll go, yeah, what do you need? And I'll go, can I have it in 2 weeks? I need it this big. And they're like, sure. And then, and they made work for a lot of artists. They're incredible. But without them being able to create something and beautifully made, there's so many hands that go into the making of an artwork, and you have to just say thank you. They haven't made my work for about 10 years or so, because they're elderly now. Boy, they were instrumental. Jenny Saville, just her pure looking at you, that looking at you, looking at yourself, and just kind of the humanity of things. And just I think that we are able to create our own story with our perspective and observation, and that's our job, to present that.
That's so true.
To be observant, really, to notice and to look up and look around, and be observant of what's going on around you, and maybe record it. And I don't know how long it'll last, but hopefully it'll last longer than maybe we will. I'm reading this incredible book. I just had to. It's called Martin Gayford, How Painting Happens and Why It Matters. And I do highly recommend it for anyone, any maker, because it explains, sometimes you just kind of think, am I the only one who thinks like this? Am I the only person as a maker? What I'm going through, am I alone? And this book, I just went, oh my God, this is like a guidebook in terms of going, you're not alone, and this is how the process works. And with current artists like Jenny Saville, versus Rothko's, and going back to Rembrandt's, and also just the process of how they've noticed things, and the well of water that they draw from to saturate themselves in art. And it's the most beautifully written. He works a lot with David Hockney, and they've done a lot of writing together, but this is the superstar. And when I was doing lots of sessions with Ali, my friend, my artist friend, I said, I'm reading this book, you have to get it, because it actually, for 30 years of working in this industry, this actually is the epitome of why art matters and how painting works. And it just explains everything.
Oh, that sounds good. That's a great recommendation. Thank you. And dear listeners who are still listening to our quite extended chat,
Yes, I'm
I
sorry.
hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you have, because honestly, it's just you're just not the kind of person who I could talk to for just half an hour. I feel like I could talk to you for days and days.
Yeah.
And it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you, Lynne. Thank you so much for sharing all your amazing little, bits of experience and sort of tips and approaches to the way that you run your practice as an artist and your business. I think you've been so inspiring. I feel really inspired myself, and I'm definitely going to come and see you next time I'm in Wellington. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. And thank you for wanting to come into my world and find out. And I hope that, other people can, take a few little gems like I take from other artists' gems when you're interviewing them. I think we're all in it together, and whatever we can share of what we do just might help you for wherever you're at. So thank you, for asking.